back with Digital Week Online. I think that last panel on central bank digital currencies was fascinating. I really enjoyed the presentations. Now we're going to move on to another subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is startup and venture investing 2021. Not 2020. We're already on 2021. You heard it here first. So let's dive in. We're going to circle through our panelists first in the order that they appear on my screen, so not by order, any other kind of preference. Each one of you, please give a very brief introduction of yourself. Say where in the world you are, though for Jenny, I may just say for everyone because I'm in shock. And say what you do, what you're working on, the short version, and then we'll sort of dive in. So Jenny is my hero. It's 2:30 in the morning in Singapore. Looking good, looking fresh. We'll start with you. Go ahead, Jenny Zhang.
Hello guys, my name is Jenny and I'm from Broadcast. Broadcast is a Singapore-based blockchain news channel. So if you're looking for to get your project to be known in Asian market, I'm the person you're looking for.
Very good. Next on my screen is Roy.
Okay.
Roy, you're looking rough.
Okay, go. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think that's a compliment. Okay.
Oh, because of your project. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. My name's Roy Lee, and I'm the founder of Rough-Chain. Rough-Chain is a public blockchain designed for Internet of Things. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's more compatible with different types of devices, edge nodes, gateways, protocols, whatever. With Rough-Chain, your D application will be able to access not only just the virtual assets, but the real world objects as well. That's pretty much it for Rough-Chain.
Very good. Thank you for coming on. Well, actually, maybe you didn't say. Are you in Canada? I wonder one's location.
Yeah, I'm in Canada. Yeah, I'm not based in Canada, but I'm trapped in Canada now.
You're trapped in Canada. I'm trapped in studio. Yeah, I know. I'm trapped in Studio City, California. It sucks. David, my good friend.
Hey guys, David Johnston here in Austin, Texas. I often am in Zurich or Zug, Switzerland. I run Yeoman's Capital, an investment firm focused entirely on blockchain and crypto. Most people know me as the dApps guy, coined the term back in 2013, and it's been a fun ride ever since.
Good. Fred, I'll even say the best for last. One of the best for last. Fred, go for it. And turn on your audio.
It'll help. Fred Krueger, I'm with Metal and the Proton blockchain, and I'm in Los Angeles, and we have kind of a complete all-in-one solution. So we are very much wallet people. We have two wallets. One's custodial, Metal Pay, where you can buy 35 different cryptos, and you can send fiat currency to other people and soon Europe. And then Proton, which is a blockchain and non-custodial wallet that we're integrating it in. So we're everything. We're a wallet, we're blockchain, and our goal is really to make it really easy and to communicate with apps. Where I think that, and I'll say this later, but I basically think kind of the current version of blockchain just doesn't work. So it's a very interesting idea, but it doesn't really work for consumers. So. That's my answer.
Doesn't work or doesn't work for consumers? I have to tease that out.
To me, that doesn't work. You know, if I can't give it to my wife or my 13-year-old kid and they're like not interested, let me go back up to Fortnite. It's not working. You know, I think we're living in this Instagram culture where everything absolutely works, right? Instagram absolutely works. Facebook absolutely.
Interesting and definitely here to stay. So that's what I'm watching right now and spending a lot of time in.
There's a lot to unpack there. The two things that caught my ear the most were slowing down and as I think you said, as opposed to raising capital. Right. Are they not raising capital or are they just raising capital a different way? But just
if you're watching these projects, right, it's very different than 2017. People aren't necessarily doing token sales anymore. They're doing liquidity events, right? They're providing governance tokens to their existing community. So it isn't like I wrote a white paper, give me money. Instead, it's like, oh, here's an application. I release it to the community. Hundreds of millions of dollars are flowing through these lending protocols or liquidity mining protocols. And then it's like, oh, let's give the community ownership over this and decentralize it. You can see Uniswap, you can see YFI, the different projects that are taking this model. And effectively, they make the announcement. And okay, for the next 7 days, anybody that owns the token is going to get these governance rights, these governance tokens. And you see sort of a rush of hundreds of millions of dollars in case of Uniswap, billion dollars flowing into their liquidity mining. That's pretty incredible. And there's a lot of copycats that came out and sort of created a bunch of froth, but it seems like that froth is dying down, but the core, reliable, interesting projects are still growing at a great rate.
Got it. And then Jenny, I guess I'll pass it to you next. Can you give us the view from Asia? Yes, I know it's 2:30 in the morning, but and it's dark out, but still the view. And are you like David? Are you, I'm gathering by the name of your company, are you solely involved in crypto and blockchain, or is it tech in general? Or what's your scope? So view from Asia, or any order you want, actually.
Okay, so I think during this COVID-19 pandemic, everything surely slows down. But for the startups, it's a good time because you don't need to rent an office, which is quite expensive, and you can hire people working from home, so they are also willing to take less salary. So I think it could be a good time for the startups, especially in blockchain, and we got more and more innovations we can see, especially the DeFi, which is like pretty heated up from this May. So I think it's pretty much a good time for blockchain startups.
You made a very interesting comment. Last night I was reading about different stages of raising capital, and I was reading in depth about seed round funding, and numerous articles reference the idea that cloud computing drove down the cost of doing a startup and kind of opened up the market for seed funding. You just added a new comment that I don't think I've heard anyone else make, which is maybe now the floor has even dropped further because of COVID. And with people working at home and you don't have to get that WeWork anymore, maybe now there's a pre-seed seed, or the capital structures or raises are going to change slightly because a second order effect of COVID is that the price of doing a startup will be even less than it was before. That's an interesting comment. What do you, and from, just so I understand where you're coming from, your primary focus is blockchain and crypto, or is it, again, is it the wider tech?
Sounds like blockchain and crypto. We are a professional blockchain news channel.
Fantastic. Fred, you are in office, right?
Actually, I recently got an office in the middle of COVID. I was just...
How are you liking that?
I love it because, nobody's going to an office. So I'm the contrarian. I figured that, I could probably get 3 times as much space for the same price, which I could, and sign a month-to-month lease. And
okay.
I still take meetings here in my office. Well, I have a great home setup too, but I actually like hanging out and meeting people. So
I think you're a serial entrepreneur. I've known you a few years now. You've
10
again and again and again started. Have you been raising
all over $10 million? Yeah.
Say that again. Just say that sentence again.
10 exits, $500 million total. All my exits are 8-figure deals for me. Thank you.
And has each one of these or most of these ventures involved taking in external capital to fund your growth and get to the next stage?
I mean, all of them have taken various types of capital. So, the very first one I did was entirely self-funded. And then, I've taken venture capital from the likes of Index Ventures and Draper and, major players. I've also taken public company money. So I've, raised money in the UK through LSE listing and raised $50 million for a listed company there.
So you fantastic. So you have your feet on the ground from the investment seeking perspective, at the very least, multiple times. What are you seeing now towards the end of 2020? And what direction do you see sort of the investment capital market heading as we go into 2021?
Well, I think you have to look a little bit beyond DeFi, because I view DeFi as a very much a bubble that is in the process of deflating. And I think by 2021, we'll be fully deflated. So my view is take a look at the price.
So I got to jump in. That's a bold statement. Is it pure wreckage?
Yeah,
or I think or is there a nugget of value in there?
It will be totally destroyed by 2021. Okay, like it will be a bad word. It'll be like ICOs in 2017. That's my view on DeFi. Now, I have some very positive things to say about Uniswap and sort of the model of Uniswap, but I think that I have very bad things to say about all the sushi swaps and sashimi swaps and flamingos and everything else going around there. This is based on a false premise. And the false premise is that you can make that there is 20% excess return that is baked in that can be achieved by farming. It's not correct. There is not 20% excess return that can be based on farming. This 20% is a Ponzi scheme that is entirely based on getting there early, selling governance tokens, cashing them out early, et cetera.
Okay, let me pause you. I hear you, but I want to drill in on the topic of the talk. So for startup and venture investing, you as startup, people situated like you.
Yeah.
What's the environment like in terms of receiving capital? Where are you seeing the current state and where are you seeing the trend?
Well, I'll tell you some of my friends. Okay, so for example, my friend Greg Osuri just raised through a different kind of vehicle, right? So he actually did an IEO for Akash Networks, right? So I don't think the IEO is done at all, right? I think a lot of people are finding ways around that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think token sales are okay. They're under a different moniker, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. So I definitely think token sales are going to be interesting, and fair launch is interesting, right? You don't pre-reserve a bunch of tokens, but you may get in there early and start mining your own tokens really fast, like Satoshi did, right? Right, like Satoshi did. So I think all these models are interesting and okay, and I think tokens are here to stay, right? And I think people are going to be using token sales. And look, Filecoin Filecoin is now at $1 billion market cap, right? So, like, if anybody said like this stuff's not out,
and by the way, Filecoin was launched with a SAP.
Sure, but the point is that here we have a very high profile token sale deal, which everybody thought was dead. It's now worth $1 billion.
Got it. Interesting, Roy.
That there were the right people behind it, the right story. It looks interesting. Right. People have an appetite for tokens. So I think tokens are interesting. I would say to people, yes, tokens are great, but you have to have good models. And I'm not sure that the DeFi model is going to last more than another 3 months. But I do think that there's a lot of great new models in crypto. So I would say for 2021, tokens are alive and well. But you better have a pretty original business plan. It can't be just I'm going to copy Compound or Uniswap and add 3 little twists and 5 lines of code. That is just not going to work anymore. I don't think. Maybe
I missed that window also. So I missed my early retirement. Roy.
Okay.
I'm going to bring you into this conversation. I want to get your entrepreneurial perspective on startup and venture funding.
From my experience, this year the total investment is definitely increasing, just like what David said. But the weight is more on growth stage, not the seed stage. It's like when you have an idea or whatever, and nobody's going to invest you. Not many people are going to invest you unless you can prove anything. People look at your products. People look at your codes. I see a lot of investors. They hire people like me to help audit their other people's code. To find out if this code is decent or whatever, and they look at the projects based on your whether if you're a copycat or whatever, like sushi swap or swap whatever. Sushi is another example, but if you are a relatively smaller copycat, whatever, you have no innovations, nothing new, whatever, and not many people are going to invest you. And sustainability is one other factor. If you can prove that your project's gonna be self-sustaining in the long run, more people are gonna invest you. So long words fraud is like more we get more money, and most money are gonna go to the fewer projects who can prove themselves. It's like when you have a rope, either you hand yourself or you prove yourself. Yeah, the barrier is getting higher, but I think it's a good news, because if we definitely want to see a few projects that can prove something. Like 3 years ago, people know nothing about Chainlinks, where people treat Chainlinks like just the other projects. A lot of people still don't understand what Chainlink does. But there are a few projects that prove themselves in these 3 years. These projects are different from the like the some trash projects in the shit coins, whatever, 3 years ago, and then the market gave them a huge market cap as a return. So I think it's good for people who can focus on writing codes, optimize your contracts, and prove your business models. If you can do that, definitely it's a good time for you. Otherwise, it's not going to be. It's going to be that easy as using token sale as a crowdfunding tour or whatever.
Doesn't that create a? So let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying that pre-MVP, it's now very hard to get seed?
That's from what I saw. People don't believe those things. People, a lot of investors, they just pay extra cash for their the technical background friends to audit your code, and they look at your products. They want to see, okay, if your business model works. Like we can see some of the products, they still raised a shitload of money, but it's based on they prove they have a working business model and they have a good contracts. Your MVP, you can convince your investors that your MVP is going to work in within a short time, like 3 months, 6 months, whatever.
Interesting, Dave. I think you've been in this world a bunch.
I really
let me pose something to you. Yeah. I can see an investor wanting to wait for an MVP, and I can see an investor having been burnt before, seeing the froth, being cautious. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing if you just have 1 or 2 technical founders banging out an MVP and getting there quickly. I wonder though, if there's some projects being left on the shelf where, for example, you need 10 engineers for 6 months to get MVP done, but once it was done, it would be good, but there's not enough cash to fill the gap to get those 10
I think that's why it's largely happening on Ethereum. If you have to have 10 or 20 engineers and a $10 million budget and you're building a layer 1, that's really tough at this point. But if you're spinning up a contract that is doing something novel and creating some real innovation, then that's something where the technical barrier is a lot lower, right? It's writing the contract and auditing the contract and deploying the contract instead of trying to do a much heavier lift of building a protocol, right? Protocols take years to design, architect, build, and deploy, right? But the reason things are moving so fast is because it's contracts on Ethereum largely that we're talking about. Chainlink is a series of contracts on Ethereum, same with YFI, same with Uniswap, right? And I agree with Fred's point, a lot of this fluff is going away, but I would push back and say there are fundamental innovations, whether it's the automated market making, whether it's lending and sort of streamlining all of that. I think if you look just at AUM, like how much ETH or stablecoin is in those contracts, that's going to continue to grow very quickly. But I agree that things are going to shake out and a lot of fluff's going to be gone. And you're going to have the top.
But I will say this: I'm going to push back on the entire Ethereum argument, right? Because I'm very vocal online as being a very Ethereum bear, and so far I've been pretty right. Okay, I've been bearish on Ethereum for a while, and I continue to be bearish on Ethereum. And I think Ethereum itself is kind of a Ponzi scheme, and it doesn't work. And so the reason I say that is
I got to jump in. Literal Ponzi scheme, because that can be taken as a sort of a defined
in a way.
It's a lot of people just kind of scamming.
Something that doesn't work. Okay, So Ethereum 2 might work, Ethereum 1 does not work. And it doesn't work for the average consumer. And the proof of that is you have really under 20,000 daily active users of all Ethereum products right now. And so that's it. That's your number. Okay. You can go to DApp Radar. You can question their analysis, but it's pretty decent numbers. Okay. It's pretty, they're looking at the actual contracts of all the things, including Uniswap and including all the dApps, which failed miserably on Ethereum. Right. And at this point, you have DeFi that's working sort of on Ethereum, right? It's working in terms of AUM. It's not working in terms of users using it, right? There's so few users, and it's the same whales. They're just recycling funds between the hot new projects, right? That's what it is. And those funds are largely Ethereum, so it's really like it's worth a lot because it's worth a lot, right? So because Ethereum has a high market cap, there's a lot of Ethereum tokens. Therefore, those tokens can go into various sushi swap overnight, and leave overnight, So
Fred, I got to jump in. The comment that it's worth a lot because it's worth a lot is sort of a negative way of saying it has the network effect.
No, it doesn't.
No?
It's
okay, tell me.
So it's because Ethereum has a very high market cap that those whales can move their tokens, and Ethereum. Let's start with it. Ethereum has a high market cap. Why does it have a high market cap? Well, because it was very overhyped in 2016, 2017. It totally failed to deliver, and it got crushed, and now it's coming back a little bit because of DeFi, all right? Okay, so we know that. So it has a high market cap, right? But because it has a high market cap, there's a lot of tokens that can go into DeFi projects on Ethereum. But all said, there's still 20,000 people using Ethereum now. On a daily basis. Now, let me contrast that with my friend Amy Wan. Do you know Amy, Gordon?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. So Amy Wan's got this little app called Bitcoin Blast. Okay. Now, Bitcoin Blast has, just to give you some stats on Bitcoin Blast, it's doing well over 100,000 daily active users. Okay. Which is 5 times Ethereum. Okay. So Bitcoin Blast is 5 times Ethereum. They're playing a stupid game called Candy Crush. Okay. And they're winning 10 cents after about, a week of play. Now that's order of, I'm not exaggerating, right? So this game is getting massive amount, this game, and just to give you an idea of how big this game is relative to the entire ecosystem, there's been a recent study out of England that says that there's about 35 million KYC users. 2 million of those came from Amy. Okay. So, 6-7% of the entire KYC crypto user base is from Bitcoin Blast. So, and really it's not a crypto game at all. It's just a game that you can earn a little bit of crypto. But my point is that Ethereum really is not it is not at all a venture scale thing, in terms of consumer adoption. Now, I think Libra would have been absolutely a consumer scale thing. Except, everybody's scared of Libra and they're just shutting it down left, right, and center. So I think that's an opportunity for all of us because I think that, we can build stuff that's going to be consumer. And I think the big story of 2021 is, taking the kind of traction you're seeing with Bitcoin Blast and moving it onto layer 1, okay? And into wallets and apps and things like that, So
let me just sort of get you short on time. So Roy and Jenny, usually I like to talk about the impact of COVID on the startup and venture scene in Asia beyond. I thought your point about working from home was very well taken. Is it affecting valuations at all? Is it affecting technical choices in terms of the products being developed as opposed to the way that the startups are operating?
I don't think there's any relation between the pandemic and the valuation or the investment activities. People more, I think investors they're more looking at whether they're looking at the long-term based. So if it takes time, it's fine. But if it's not going to work, then it's not about the pandemic or not. Back to the previous question. I mean, I'm pretty interested about what Fred just said. I think a lot of people, I mean, people from general public, they have difficulty accessing the Ethereum or any other on-chain products, is because we still have some sort of a technical issue right now. But we're working on it. I see the smartest people in this world, they are working on it. So it's going to take some time. Considering like 20,000 active users, I don't think it's a big problem. Look at the Binance, look at the Huobi, look at the centralized exchange. They have millions of users, like 4 or 5 million users each. So we have enough crypto users. Definitely we have enough crypto users. It's just like people, only small portion of users can access the DeFi right now because of the Ethereum, the barrier of the Ethereum itself. I think this thing will change. It's not about people who don't believe in crypto. As long as we have it, I think the hardest part is to convince people, convince my aunt, whatever, that crypto is not a Ponzi scam, whatever. That's the hardest part. If you can convince them that crypto is not an economic scam or whatever, I think it's just a matter of time what kind of products we're gonna see. Like Libra, definitely it's going to be something good. But Libra, I'm not a big fan of Libra. I think there will be more products that if there will be one-step products that can lower barrier of the people from general public to be able to access the Ethereum or the other on-chain products, the decentralized applications. That would be great.
Roy, I'm so sorry. I got to stop you. We just ran out of time, and Juliet is typing me, and I'm getting all kind of moderation warnings. So I wish we had more time. I think I'm gonna have you guys on my show so we can go more in depth. But I just want to thank our panelists. Really appreciate it. David, thank you. Jenny, thank you. Roy, Fred, but really Jenny, 2:30 in the morning in Singapore, and you pulled it off, and you did great. So thank you. And thank you to Andy Lam for introducing me to you too.
Thanks, guys.
To be continued. Einstein. We're back to Digital Week Online. I thought that was a very interesting panel we just had on startup and venture investing 2021. And yet another topic that's near and dear to my heart. We have a 1 hour long, looking at all these names, I say major brainiac session on artificial intelligence, innovation, and privacy. And I think I'll give my comment that those things may be at odds or they may be synergistic. And I look very much forward to hearing what this group has to say. I want to give a shout out to Privacy Rules, who's the organizer, sponsor, and host of this event. I'm going to pass this over to, by the way, I'm horrible with names. So I'm going to say Andrea.
Andrea, exactly.
Am I saying
that's
this right?
Perfect.
Okay,
that's perfect.
Pardon my Americanisms. I'm just not that good. But
Gordon, no worries, no worries. I grew up in Italy, and my first surname, which is Polish, was never pronounced by anyone. So I've been Andrea all my life for one reason or another. So I'm used to that. No worries.
All right, I appreciate it. So I'm gonna hand it to you. I'm gonna put myself on mute and turn off the video, but I'm gonna watch. This is a fascinating topic. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, and thank you very much, Gordon. Thank you very much also to Ivan and all the other organizers of the Digital Week Online. It's the second time for us to be present here this year, and we did run the through the last 3 days actually panels on privacy across different continents. Gordon, you were talking about the title. Actually, is intentionally a provocation. The different items might be at odds, but in reality, actually, they need to converge. And we have assembled a fantastic panel of speakers across the Americas. Angela just connected with us from Colombia, and then we go all the way up to Canada. I will introduce them, all of them, in a second. We are waiting for other two panelists still. A few words about Privacy Rules. We are a global organization of legal and technology experts on privacy and cybersecurity and other data-related service providers. We saw light, so to say, about 2.5 years ago, and we are now already present in 52 jurisdictions in all continents. Among us, in fact, are here our moderator, Ken Morris, and also Mike Nitardy from Frost Brown Todd, our law firm member in the US, and they are also founding members of Privacy Rules. So luckily, actually, our retention policy worked quite well. What we do, actually, we do provide, together with our members, sophisticated and integrated advice from the legal and the cybersecurity perspective and other elements related to data globally, to any company, institution, entity, organization that is looking for this kind of support. Data go around the world. We are pretty much all around the world in the major economies already, and we are growing, and so we are ready to assist anyone in any moment. All our members are also visible in Privacy Rules platforms. I invite all of you to visit our website, which is here under my ugly face, and also please register, subscribe to our newsletter, and follow us on our social media in order to discover actually all our activities and our events. I don't really want to take much more of your time, because the protagonists are our speakers around the very sensitive topic. So to introduce them, we have Ken Morris, who's CEO and founder of ConnectIQ, a cybersecurity company from the US with offices also in Europe, and he will be the moderator of this session. We are still waiting for, actually, I will introduce the presents now. We have Angela Noguera, legal experts from Colombia and Latin America in general. We have Ron Bodkin. He's not our member, so we are very pleased to have him together with us. He is the Vice President of Artificial Intelligence Engineering and CEO at the Vector Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And Mike Nitardy from the law firm Frost Brown Todd, one of the top 150 law firms in the US. Now I see that luckily Dr.Mohsen Rezayat accessed the room. Dr.Mohsen Rezayat is Chief Solutions Architect at Siemens, the multinational companies. So obviously it's an honor for us to have such a giant together with us speaking about artificial intelligence and innovation. And also Alexander White is getting connected. He is the data protection authority is the Data Protection Commissioner from the Bermudas. He recently authored an article related to the importance for companies to have a privacy-wise policy that is a driving force for innovation. So it's very much to the point of the topic of today. Not more time from my side. I pass it to Ken, and thanks very much to all of you in the audience for being here and reaching out to us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to all the panelists that'll be here today. We're going to dive right into a provocative topic. But just to set the stage a bit, I do want to give a little bit of the parameters that we'll be considering these questions and topics around. We'll be wrapping everything around and using as an anchor point fundamental data protection and data privacy principles. So we think in terms of 1, lawfulness, fairness, transparency. 2, looking at the limitations on the collection, processing, and storage of data. 3, data minimization as one of the other principles. The accuracy of the data, and integrity and confidentiality of the data. So as we think about the concepts and intersects of artificial intelligence, innovation, and privacy, our speakers will be wrapping their content and responses to the various questions around them. So let us begin. Michael Nitardy, first question goes to you. What are the privacy laws and regulations that might impact the advancement of artificial intelligence?
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And I think that it kind of goes to the initial introduction from Gordon, where he was talking about how these items all play together. And that is, obviously AI needs a lot of data, a lot of data. And a lot of that's going to be personal data. And so then whenever you've got a regulatory regime that provides certain individual rights to those data subjects or to individuals where that data is coming from, then that's going to have an impact on the increase in the adoption of artificial intelligence. You mentioned the data protection principles, which basically comprise Article 5 of the GDPR. Those right there show you what's going to be in the way of a robust acceptance of artificial intelligence. Talking about, we just said that you need a lot of data. Well, one of the principles is data minimization. Seems to run at odds in acceptance and adoption of AI. And then you also look at the rights that are provided to individuals, the right to correct, the right to object, the right to know if automatic decision-making processes is taking place under the GDPR. So these are the types of regulatory regimes, although very vital in maintaining trust in the process, may inhibit the adoption of artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Mike. This next question is to Ron Bodkin. Michael talked a little bit about some potential risk as it relates to privacy. Can you talk a little bit about what might we see as risk to privacy from artificial intelligence systems now and certainly in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So building on Mike's point about collecting data, right, that there's motivation there for companies providing or organizations providing AI services to collect and integrate larger and more distinctive types of data. I look forward to talking more about some innovations that may mitigate some of those risks, but that's a clear risk. We're seeing this increase in variety, volume, and of course, duration of data collection. I think also, right, we're seeing a downward spiral. A big part of privacy is really what are our collective expectations, social norms of privacy. And so as we're seeing the use of AI systems doing things like fragmenting us into filter bubbles and isolating us, we're seeing an increased norm of highly personalized, highly individualized systems, which is really, it wasn't so long ago that a former tech CEO said, well, privacy is dead, right? And I certainly hope that we don't accept that as a societal norm, right? Other aspects to touch on briefly, our ability to control derived data is an important part of this, right? That I think this is well described by Shoshana Zuboff in Surveillance Capitalism, when she talks about the shadow text, right? This idea that it's not just the direct information about you, but it's all this derived information that models are producing that are a privacy risk, right? So when Facebook had a subject data request under GDPR to provide all the data for a user, they said, we will not share this derived data because you won't understand it, right? And that sort of drives to this lack of transparency and accountability, right? It's not just what you literally captured about what I produced that's a privacy risk, but it's also all the things you think you know about me that may not even be true. And that sort of leads to, what are you doing to me, right? It's not just privacy as in how are you watching me, but how are you manipulating me? How are you influencing me, right? What are you doing to change my choices? And am I a part of involuntary experimentation? Well, I think we know that A/B testing and experimentation is widespread in the digital space, but how does that affect our privacy right as individuals? Believe me, AI systems are frequently developed through the same kind of experimentation techniques as UI systems, visual interactions, right? So one example, and then I'll turn it back to you, Ken, but long ago, before there was the same level of scrutiny of privacy in AI, Facebook published a research paper talking about how they were able to influence people to vote by presenting certain information in front of them as an experiment, right? And of course, AI systems that do that kind of experimentation, well, let's just say that a lot of us feel like that would be a violation of our privacy. So I think those are some of the kinds of risks to privacy from AI systems.
Thank you, Ron. Angela, this is, I think, a natural for some of the things that we know you've been thinking about in terms of influence, experimentation. So what do you think about consequences for privacy when AI algorithms don't lead to accuracy? And accuracy is one of the fundamental principles. Fairness is another. When we think about the results of data that's been analyzed.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you all for being here. Well, first of all, I have to say that in a world without artificial intelligence, many information is analyzed without accuracy. It's not that that accuracy is what we have, and we will not have it with AI, because human beings, we make mistakes, we are subjective with our analysis, we may be confused or whatever when we analyze data. Maybe we mix up some data and that makes the results not accurate. So it's something that happens already, but we should not aim for the same with artificial intelligence. We should aim for more, and we should aim for better. And that's why this is something that I think it's a big concern in accuracy. And I will go back maybe to Ron's example on social media. For example, what happens when the social company or the Facebook, for example, gets you wrong in terms of who you are or what you think or what are your preferences. That would be misleading, not only misleading, but also kind of concerning for yourself. For example, if I am a woman, clearly, and if I would like to use short hair, flat shoes, only trousers, no skirts, no dresses, and I don't no makeup and whatever else, and the prediction algorithm takes me for a man, and it just tells me men's clothes, men's preferences, everything that is misleading, but somehow it's could be like matching with my profile but not accurate. That would be not nice for me. But this is just an example. But for example, what would happen if these prediction algorithms are in terms of a social, a bigger population, for example, a vulnerable community. For example, if there's an algorithm to predict the number of police forces or military forces that are needed in a marginated neighborhood, for example, and is not accurate, and what it does is that it ends up perpetuating the stigmatization of such neighborhood for its crime or whatever, and it keeps on saying that it's very dangerous and that the population are dangerous there and that people should not be near there. So what it does is that it would isolate more that community, and that would have lots of terrible consequences, not just for one person in the shopping preferences, but as a society. And for example, in terms of public policy, which would lead, if it's unaccompanied, these algorithms are not audited and not without human intervention, all these things could happen. Maybe we can elaborate about it later.
Thank you. Mohsen, there's a theme that's emerging here. We've talked about risk, we've talked about consequences, and AI in many ways is used as a decision support, decision-making utility. All of that wraps around this idea of trust. So can you talk a little bit about concept of what's trustworthy AI, if there is such a thing, and what's its relationship to privacy?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I hope you can hear me well. In our industry, trust is the basis for everything, and AI is now embedded in many software and hardware products that Siemens creates. Now, AI is trusted when, one, it takes into account robustness concerns, meaning that systems we create should be fairly accurate and stable. You don't want them to just crashing all over the place. Two, they need to respect all laws, including, for instance, GDPR and issues therein like consent and right to explanation. And number three, it needs to comply with ethical principles, principles like addressing fairness and bias, providing transparency, and ensuring no harm would come to humans from application of AI. Now, I've listened with a lot of interest to the conversation right now, and we have said a lot about how AI can affect privacy. I will be talking more about how privacy can actually impact AI. In my opinion, privacy affects all three aspects of trustworthy AI that I just talked about. We can only have an accurate and stable system if we have access to adequate and representative data. With GDPR and other laws, we have legal issues such as consent that I already mentioned. And of course, preserving privacy is a main pillar of ethics in AI. So hopefully we'll come back to this topic and discuss it more, and I can go through some examples later on, but I want to give a chance for more of the discussion to happen, but I would hope that we come back to this topic again.
Oh, but we most certainly will. You know, we've talked a lot about issues of trust, and Mohsen was just gave us this wonderful list of concepts and things principles we need to consider when we think about ethical AI. This question is for you, Alex. You know, you are on the government side, and we know that Bermuda, like a lot of jurisdictions, are looking to have really innovative cultures, driving technology and the like. So as you think about what factors, given all that we've talked about so far, or principles should guide people who are developing, this could be tech developers or whatever, but they're producing AI processes or any other innovative technologies that may in fact touch either directly or indirectly privacy.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because in the last few days we have been having the Bermuda Tech Summit here, and so we've been doing a lot of talking about tokens and digital currencies and all kinds of good stuff. And so that's you're really striking a chord right now. But the main thing, and as Mike mentioned, there's a lot of different principles out there you can look at. There's a lot of different potential guidance you can look to. But if I were to sum it up into what core concept I think is most important for organizations, that's the idea of accountability. And there's really two aspects of that. Firstly, it's the responsibility aspect of it. To say, okay, you as an organization are responsible for your data. You're responsible for what happens to your data. And I know it's very easy for a regulator to say that and then say, okay, so go figure it out and come back to me. But that's not the tact I want to take. And so I actually have a program right now called the Pink Sandbox, because we're famous for pink sand here in Bermuda. So it's a privacy, innovation, and knowledge sharing sandbox. But the idea is let's work on these issues together. These are novel issues. They're things that our framework has not been tested against yet. And so let's do it in a collaborative way. And I'm willing to stick my neck out in a way for that. And the other side of accountability is also being able to show your work and being able to say, here's what our app does. Here's what our AI does. That's a huge problem, especially in the AI algorithm space. Kind of have a black box, and you can't really say exactly why you're getting the decisions that you are. And that kind of provability and testability is critical if we're ever going to improve how these processes work and make sure they work fairly.
Well, Alex, thank you. You spoke about showing your work, and we know that in most organizations, algorithms are part of an organization's IP. They're critical, they're valuable. In most cases now, they're not patentable, so people keep them as trade secrets. So if that is one of the risks, really interesting, Ron, if you could talk about technical advances that might be useful, or what has been made or available now to improve privacy, given some of the things that have gone before.
Absolutely, Ken. So certainly touching on that the point around transparency first, there has been a lot of innovation around interpreting machine learning models to basically come up with ways around where you have an opaque model, whatever the model does, that you can say things like, here are the inputs that are moving the needle that cause it generally to work, or specific decisions to be made, or here are counterfactuals. If I change certain characteristics, how would it behave? What are analogies like in assessing a home that would let you say, here are the comparables that are leading to this conclusion. But I actually happen to think that all of those around the complexity of modern AI models have limitations. So there's also research that I think is a little more promising around building models that are inherently interpretable, that the requirement for the model is that it be able to explain itself for the right stakeholder. So those are important. But transparency is one aspect of advances to improve privacy in AI systems. Another is differential privacy, including local differential privacy, which really gives you stronger mathematical guarantees around protecting individual information while creating value from AI. Another is federated learning, which lets you train AI models without having centralized data, right? And so that really is a foundational element that can let you build decentralized architectures. As Alex touched on around the notion of blockchain, right? That is foundational digital currencies. They have a more decentralized information architecture. In order to enable that, you would have to have federated learning capabilities to have training and generating value from AI without centralizing the data, right? And there are projects out there that are pushing on that, as well as research. And there's other aspects like creating realistic synthetic data to minimize the need to share sensitive data when developing models, and few-shot learning to make it easier to actually make AI models that are smarter, that don't aren't so voracious around requiring massive amounts of data in order to do useful things. And lastly, there's interesting advances around quantifying the risks of data leakage and the risk of privacy loss around these, so quantification. So there's a lot of technical advances that can allow us to have better privacy while still getting real value from AI systems.
Great, thank you. That's a perfect segue to you, Angela. We've talked a lot about, again, some potential technological mechanisms that might be in place. When you think about AI processes, additionally, what other concepts, mechanisms, tools do you see that would make those AI processes a bit more trustworthy?
Well, first of all, I would say that ethics, it's a fundamental one. It may not be technical in the sense of how to design the architecture of the process, but I think it's something that it has to be taken into account from the design of the algorithm and all the way through the development of the algorithm and when it is put in place. Sort of a ethics by design, trying to I think it's impossible to make a machine think as a human and have these ethical principles that we are thinking about. But that is something that I think it's fundamental, and how to do that. There are some tools to do that. For example, having these ethical frameworks for the several countries, or ethical principles of artificial intelligence put in place, not only locally but internationally. For example, the OECD principles that are have been signed by so many countries. These are some standards that can be used and can be adopted by many companies and by many countries. Another thing that I mentioned before is the intervention, the human intervention all through the process. And I think it's the same as we I think we sometimes think that artificial intelligence is so complex and so difficult to understand that is scary. But if we think about human minds and human way of thinking, that's also very complex, even more complex than the machine. So we shouldn't be thinking on how to understand the machine learning process. And it's like if we judge the way a person thinks, and we would oblige people to say, why did you think that? Why did you say that? And why did you think? What was your process of thinking for the past 5 minutes or 1 year or 2 years? It would be impossible, and we don't do it in with humans. And I think it's something that we have to it's not let it be like, machines are going to dominate the world. But I think we have to assume that at certain point machine learning is going to give what it does, autonomy to the algorithms. And that's something that also happens without intervention of our artificial intelligence. But I think a human intervention in those processes and in the implementation process of these algorithms is essential, the same as in people's behavior. For example, if you are the manager or the human resources chief of a company, and you keep on deciding certain things, someone is auditing you, and someone, I don't know, a coach and the management of the company and many other people are also auditing your work to know what are your process of thinking, your analysis, and if something's wrong or something is not aligned with the company's purposes and the company's way of being, they remove you, or they re-educate the process of how to, for example, select employees or whatever. I think something like that is also important, to trust the processes of algorithms by artificial intelligence. And lastly, I would say that it is very important to have to also have this audits, all these periodical audits, and also the sense of what is the purpose of the algorithm. I think that's something fundamental also, because you cannot just say, okay, we're collecting data because we want to analyze data, and that's what the algorithms are going to do, just collect and analyze. They have to be limited on what they want to do or what they should be doing. And I know maybe this would generate some debate, because I think that's obviously the debate between what IT companies want to do and what the legal framework and ethical framework puts some burdens and some limitations to it. But I think that's important to have some limitations on the purpose of the data that is being collected and analyzed.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of an audible here, only because we've been talking about this issue of trust. And yes, Mohsen, we are going to dig into this. There's been a lot of discussion. And by the way, this is going to be a Mohsen, Alex, and Michael. I'll be coming to each of you in order. There's been a lot of discussion, certainly around trust AI. There's been artificial intelligence that has been rewriting its own base code. We don't know the language that they've been using. And now we're looking at this issue, not just of decision making, but human machine collaboration around decision making, decision support, what level of autonomy should we be having, and the like. So first to most, when you're thinking about all of that, what are some of the consequences fundamentally if people do not trust AI because of some of the foregoing points I mentioned?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ken. I think if we don't have this trust in AI that you were just talking about, important problems cannot benefit from it. So let me use an example to kind of explain what I'm talking about. We have open image and handwritten digit databases such as ImageNet and MNIST that are commonly used because they are very much accessible. Everybody and their uncle that's doing work in the area of AI and machine learning gets a hold of this and goes through examples of how to recognize digits and pictures of cats. But there are very much more important problems like cancer, Alzheimer's, depression, COVID-19 that we have to address. But, well, that's a much different problem because you don't have access to data as easily as you do to digits and pictures of cats. To get the amount of data that is required, you better have a lot of money, and then you better be able to explain to a lot of regulatory outfits what you're going to do with that data and what's going to happen, and can you be trusted. So this is why people are trying to avoid use of these other databases, both because of the cost and the responsibilities that they go. And so we keep solving image recognition for cats and dogs and this digit recognition instead of paying attention to these much more important problems. Now, I want to continue with what Ron said. For tools that we have to address this issue of privacy preserving AI. He mentioned federated learning, where we basically said, okay, we're going to, instead of bringing the data to a central server, we will take the model in the server to the data. And that way we can use the data on the devices that people have, so they don't have to give us their data. We'll just train our model there. But then some clever guy came and said, well, wait a minute, I can go ahead and reverse engineer using the weights of the model you had and find out the information. So we went to the secondary level of what's called secure multi-party computation, where we actually distribute the weights to many people. Again, people came back and said, no, that's still not convincing enough. So then we added a third layer that Ron mentioned called differential privacy, where we actually introduce some noise into the data. Well, all of these things are adding quite a bit of overhead. They are requiring more training time. They are decreasing the accuracy. And now we are trying to figure out how do we reduce the training time and increase efficiency and accuracy. And we also need to stop malicious attempts to corrupt the data. So there is more to be done. And there is not enough time for me to go through all of it, but I just want to conclude that any AI model we develop should provide strong privacy assurances. Otherwise, we won't receive adequate data for solving critical problems like I just talked about, and thus AI models won't be applied as effectively as they should.
Thank you. All right, Alex. So given all the foregoing that Mohsen just talked about, we know that what you're doing, certainly as a regulator in Bermuda, is trying to incent organizations, startups, and the like. Can you talk about, it's going to be a multi-part question. Can you discuss a little bit about how investing in privacy programs might benefit an organization and the like, particularly startups who are hopefully doing privacy and data protection by design? And the second part of that is, what benefits do you see that will stream or flow from engaging with regulators early, if you have startups doing that or even seasoned businesses?
Yeah, and this is something I touched on in an article on my blog. Privacy.bm is my website, but it's called Privacy Means Business, because I'm trying to encourage businesses to take that mindset of this being an enabler. And there's statistics to back that up now, to say that privacy, having a privacy program, having a mature way of utilizing data and organizing your data management practices have significant measurable benefits for organizations. And so there is this Cisco data privacy survey that just came out last year, and Forrester does an ROI of privacy as well. So you can see some different examples there, but just to throw a couple of numbers at you, according to the Cisco survey of last year, for every dollar that an organization spent, on average, there was a return of $2.70. And so there was an ROI right there for privacy spent. But even more than that, there were significant instances of building consumer trust, being able to make sales, either because your data was organized sufficiently that you were able to appropriately contact individuals, or even privacy being a selling point for the customers. And so, there was statistical evidence for privacy increasing sales and having that positive gain. We always think about it that as being trying to avoid a bad thing, or trying to make sure that the regulators don't come down on you. But there's a lot of positives that can come out of a privacy program. And I think especially for startups or organizations that are in early days, just think of all the time that you invest in when you're going through design, when you're going through development, when you're building a product. If you can catch an issue early on, then you can avoid so many missteps. You can avoid so much wasted time or time going down the wrong path. And that's why I think it's so critical to try to engage with a regulator early on, even just to have a casual, kind of almost like an issue spotting conversation of what could go wrong here? What should we be thinking about? How can we be managing these things? And especially for a startup or someone who is seeking investors, that was another element of the survey, the Cisco survey that came out, that said that I believe is 73%, I think it was, of all companies said having a privacy program made them more attractive to their investors.
Well, now we just have to assure that those on the capital side, such as VCs and the like, understand this principle and make that a requirement, frankly, of the companies that they will be funding. We've talked a lot about regulation. So Mike, what's sort of the state of the affairs here in the US? And if you could do a little bit of prognostication for us in terms of what you see coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, that's a great question. For those that are familiar with privacy law in the U.S., it takes a sectoral-based approach. Unlike Europe, there is no omnibus federal law that recognizes the fundamental right to data protection for an individual. Because of that, and that's one of the reasons that a lot of the privacy regulation or any type of perhaps regulation that would start around this issue as it relates to AI has really been put forth by the Federal Trade Commission. This past April, they came out with a questionnaire and some recommended guidelines and decision-making about algorithms. And it really follows the principles that we talked about earlier of transparency and fairness, especially when making sure that consumers are aware of the decision-making process for automated decision-making. But that was just guidelines. And what's interesting is, so there is no specific law right now regulating any of this area. Everything is very much at the nascent stage. And so that means that the FTC really has a lot of discretion in what they might bring enforcement actions on for actions by companies in this area that perhaps aren't living up to what the FTC would like to see in terms of transparency or in terms of fair information principles. So because of the nascent stage of it and because of the tension that we've been talking about, I don't foresee any type of legislation in this area to regulate it at this time, except for perhaps maybe some type of omnibus privacy legislation, but not dealing specific with artificial intelligence.
Well, one of the pieces that you mentioned around regulation, certainly here in the United States, and yes, it tends to be a bit more consumer-based. There is this interesting connection to AI, and one might say its progeny or predecessor of machine learning. The quality of the data, particularly in real-time analytical situations, and we're starting to see this not just in the military, but in decision-making that may be going on in the healthcare sector and the like. So there's real-time data coming in. What are your thoughts, and this question is just open for anyone who may want to tackle it, around how do we assure the veracity, accuracy, confidentiality of the data as it's moving from its remote source, wherever that happens to be, into these sort of AI algorithms or modalities or machines that are actually sort of doing the analytical work. So again, it gets back to this trust question, so people can rest assured that the pipeline from data source is pure all the way to and through the actual analytical engine. So I will just offer that one up to anybody who wants to take it. Or I can be ruthless and assign. Mohsen.
I think we have some hope in this area, right? The point is that things are not fixed. When you talk about transparency and bias and data correlation that we have in AI, what is considered private today might change tomorrow. So what are we doing to be able to pull things out of a model once it's been baked in? If I have permission today, and based on the rules of GDPR, at any point, a person can come in and say, I want an explanation for why that data was correlated with this data and whatever was exposed. How do we go and try to change all of that? I think, to me, there is still a lot that we need to do in order to understand impact of data correlation. We need to understand, as things change with time, how we evolve the models to go along with the changing laws and changing times. And so there is a lot of work ahead of us, and I don't pretend like we have solved this issue. We still need to do a lot of work with the transparency of AI and ability to react to the changing regulations and changing times and changing needs that people have. Giving consent right now doesn't mean that 2 years from now things are not going to change. And how do we react to that? So To me, the question is not answered yet, and it's a difficult one, and you just have to keep working at it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I might add, yeah, thanks. I might add just, I think that in some sense, GDPR was the Y2K moment, at least for the data foundations for AI, and that many organizations really had to rethink their data systems to be able to comply with GDPR. But I would say that getting your data infrastructure right is foundational, right? Today's machine learning certainly feeds on massive amounts of data. And so organizations need to have the governance and control of their data systems to know where the data is and how it's being processed, right? If somebody asks to have their data deleted, you need to know you have all of it, right? And so you need to know the characteristics of the data, right? And of course, to Mike's point, we're in a world of digital fragmentation, right? So many organizations need to be able to comply with privacy laws in many jurisdictions, right? That might be different states in California, like CCPA in California. That might be different privacy regulations in Canada, like PIPEDA, it might be GDPR and beyond, right? So this means you better have your data infrastructure right. So you're able to track, and of course, Bermuda's laws as well. But you have to have your data infrastructure right to be able to track your compliance as foundational, right? As well as some of the AI specific modeling requirements, right? Those data foundations for privacy are important for AI, and they're important for all uses, all compliant with privacy.
Angela, your thoughts?
I don't have too many other things to add, but I think it's important to just get it right and to have it with transparency and with the auditing and taking into account that it's massive data that we are dealing with in each and every process that an algorithm that is being is running right now. There are massive amounts of data, and that it may be difficult to keep track of it, but we have to do the best to do that.
All right, we're getting close to wrap up time here, but I've got another question. We are seeing a move, and this is really appending onto the prior question. We're seeing a move from using massive data sets, data lakes that are scattered around the globe from which data are being pulling, more toward real-time sensor-based node collection, moving of data to these analytical engines. And this is, again, to Mike and to Alex, certainly as a regulator. What are your thoughts around, how do we, again, assure that what's going into these engines has not been adulterated, tampered with, and in many ways it goes to this trust question once again, because as we all know who have been in this business a while, and I as a cyber person, if the data is garbage going in, the reality is you're not going to get much utility out of it on the back end. So when we think about something as critical as I believe AI will become in decision support and decision making in the future, and to Mohsen's point about all of these different types of good societal health, economic uses, we have to trust it. But it all starts with the data. So if we have data that's being fed in, think about energy from various sensor networks around the globe. What are your thoughts about that in terms of assuring that the foundation of these systems is fundamentally clean? And I'll start with you, Mike.
Well, I think that means that the security is also just as important. I mean, so that means that not only do you have to trust the data that's going in, but data in flight and data while it's moving around throughout the entire process. Another thing that's key with the GDPR is security. It's one of the principles also that we talked about earlier today, integrity and security. So being able to show throughout the process that you have kept the information secure, and that you have either allowed others to use it and that you've passed along that responsibility to keep it secure, I think is vital.
Do you see any benefit for that being auditable, certifiable, for the custodial process for the data, wherever it happens to be in situ, in a data set, and in flight?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Great. Let's go to Alex as our auditor and regulator, and you will get the last word, and I will pass this on after that to Andrea.
Well, in my mind, a lot of these points that you're bringing up can stem from the need for us as a society to try to emphasize interoperability more.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that from a technical perspective of we need to build systems that can communicate to each other, that can examine what's happening, that can, similar to a distributed ledger that can audit, the books. We need to have those sorts of frameworks in place instead of having all of these different companies with their own fiefdom and their own proprietary data. The more we can have things interconnect and talk to each other, the more we'll be able to structure those things. But also interconnected from a legal perspective and a jurisdictional perspective. I mean, we talked about some of the different frameworks that are out there, but in reality, there's a lot of similarity and there's a lot of convergence. And I think there's a way we can find best practices for how we audit data practice, or how we audit, the different data collections that you're talking about. There are ways that we can construct that.
Thanks, Alex. And I'll sum up on this. One of the things that we certainly look at my company, Connect IQ, is this whole issue of ensuring that data remains inviolate when it is in transit, so that all the good work that is being done around the globe with machine learning and artificial intelligence, those data can actually be trusted, not to have been adulterated or interrupted in any way. And there are these three principles that we like to think about, certainly connected with data privacy, artificial intelligence, and innovation. And that is, when data is moving, there should be continuous monitoring of that data from the time it leaves to the time it gets to its other end without having to decrypt it. Second, the security has to be auditable, and logs, so you know exactly what has happened to that data from point of exit to point of entry on the other side. And finally, there has to be immediate threat detection if, in fact, someone is attempting to alter that data in any way or interfere with that data in any way. We see that, again, as crucial to this process to allow, hopefully, AI to at least have a trust mechanism at the beginning of the particular process. I just want to thank you all for all your brilliant insights today. It's extraordinarily helpful and provocative, and those participants who are viewing and will view later, I think they will find a number of takeaways that will be helpful to them, and certainly from each of you. All right, on that note, Andrea, I will pass this back to you. Thank you.
And I want indeed to thank you, Ken, first and foremost, because you have managed a very dynamic and live debates among experts coming from completely different fields. And once more, actually, I think this shows the importance of global events like the Digital Week Online. So in these, actually, I want to thank Gordon and Ivan and all the other organizers, and also of entities like Privacy Rules, because this is what we do, actually. We bring around the same table experts from all over to provide actually accurate and forward-looking information. In order of appearance in my screen, I want to start by thanking Ron. Really interesting, actually, listening to you, and thank you very much. We didn't mention, but Ron also comes from a Google experience, which might be seen to some extent as the elephant in the room. So it was fascinating hearing from you, and definitely actually to your incredible background. Likewise, from Mohsen, Siemens is probably one of the largest, if not the largest, multinational company out there. So having you as the chief solutions architect here speaking with us, it's an honor, and actually allows us to see where companies of that dimension actually go to. And then I have Alex on my screen. I think all those in Bermuda are blessed by the fact that they have a commissioner that is so much keen to help business. Is not so much the case in many other larger jurisdictions where you have authorities ready to, you know, to beat companies that don't comply, but not so much to help them. And I thank very much all our members. Again, starting from order of appearance, Mike from the US and Angela from Colombia. We will have them protagonists in many of our future webinars, starting in fact from one on the 28th this month on big data and privacy and AI ethics in Spanish language. So if there is anyone out there listening at us in from a Spanish-speaking country, please connect with us on the 28th, and you will see Angela again debating with other experts from Spanish-speaking countries. Thanks so much again to everyone in the audience. It's been a pleasure, and please follow us and our members through our platforms. Thank you very much again.